Topics Overview Committee Presentation Recap. I am guessing that might be you, Rocky.
Yeah, so I just wanted to update everybody that Joel Paulson gave a presentation to the Water Topics Overview Committee on June 4th. This was a meeting that was originally supposed to happen in March, and so it was delayed for COVID reasons. And it was, I think, a good opportunity to update the legislative body on a number of items. I think they are getting used to our updates now. I don't think it was a lot related to the project. I think the committee was focused on other economic issues, and just kind of update the committee on what I mean by that is water projects in the state of North Dakota are solely funded through the Resources Trust Fund, which gets all their money from oil revenue. And so with oil taking quite a hit lately, their projections for revenue are down quite dramatically. And so they went through and talked with every project about what's shovel ready and what's not. And I think they're trying to help the State Water Commission really refine their budget outlook over the next, the rest of the biennium here, the next year. And so we have some follow up with them to do coming up for a July meeting of the State Water Commission to talk about what funding we need in the short term versus long term and have those discussions. I don't know, Joel, if there's additional you'd like to add.
Yeah, thanks, Rocky. I guess I would just add. I think Rocky did a good recap there. The biggest interest was in what the requests were going to be for the financial cost share of the state for all the big water projects, and all the big water projects were presented at the Water Topics Overview Committee. And, I think that it's centered around, trying to balance the obligations of the State Water Commission through the Resources Trust Fund with the potential or projected revenue, given the drop in oil revenues into that account. So I think overall it was a good discussion. The Diversion Authority is in a position where we can work with the State Water Commission. We have enough flexibility in our financial plan, given the WIFIA loan and the ability for us to draw off of that initially as we get going, and maybe defer some of the state dollars until later on in the program, with the intent or the hopes that the oil prices recover and we get back to some level of normal. So that was basically the main topic. I did outline construction progress and gave the committee an update on schedule and where we're at with certain things. But I would say a majority of the interest was trying to balance that Resources Trust Fund and the obligations of the State Water Commission.
Any questions from the committee on that? Rick, if you're
that would help if I had muted it. I said, hearing no questions, go ahead and carry on with the next item. Did you have something else on the actual the virtual meeting presentation, or is that?
No, well, I guess I was just going to mention. Yeah, sorry, that's a little confusing. It was all done virtually, so the state legislature is still not meeting in person for those interim committee meetings. I did hear some discussion. Actually, it might just be rumor, but they're talking about how to make more of the legislative session come January virtual as well, sort of not knowing what week to week is going to bring, but let alone what comes in January. And so that it should be interesting to see. In some ways, it was really nice to not have to drive to Bismarck and back in the day. And so I think virtual definitely has its benefits.
All right. Anything else in North Dakota legislative? It looks like not. So we're moving on to Minnesota legislative.
Just sort of two short updates. There is a special session going on in Minnesota to respond to COVID, but they're also talking about the bonding bill. There was no bonding bill passed during the regular session. There is money available to the Minnesota DNR in that bonding bill for flood projects across the state, and that's the sort of pot of money that we're hoping we can continue to tap into for funding for Moorhead and for in-town work and for Plan B as well. And so I think we're hopeful of that. I don't think there's maybe a lot of room to negotiate a larger pool of money in there, but I think we're happy with the amount of money that's in there and Moorhead's chances of being able to recoup some of that. So we're watching that closely.
Okay.
The other bullet there just is maybe an update. Joel and I were able to meet with the DFL endorsed candidate in District 4A, City of Moorhead, basically, Heather Keeler. She's running for the replace Representative Ben Lean, who's no longer retiring from office, I guess, after this session's end. Had a really good meeting. She's got a lot of background in flood history and her own personal history, and so she was asked a lot of good questions, and we look forward to more communication with her as we move forward through the process.
All right. Any questions for Rocky on the Minnesota legislative update? Hearing none, we move on to property owner outreach. And is Eric taking that or somebody else?
Is Eric online? I can't see the participant list.
Yeah, I'm here. Hi guys. I can give an update on this and look to Rocky or Joel or others if they'd like to add on. As I think most of you are aware, we had been working towards doing a pretty thorough outreach campaign to all of the upstream property owners as we had received approval of the mitigation plan from the North Dakota State Engineer, and we've been anticipating approval of the Clomer from FEMA. So we're, I guess, working on, had been working towards maps and letters and documents and things to share with all the property owners as a way to supply them some more information. In your packet here, the next couple pages show a summary of the mitigation plan. This is a 4-page document that tries to summarize many of the components of the mitigation plan. A lot of information on these slides, which may seem a bit sort of intimidating, but I guess these are, most of this is related to agricultural mitigation, and we know that property owners are asking for what's going to happen and how we're going to mitigate things. And so we think that this will be, hopefully well received by property owners, and they might appreciate getting some more details. I will note though, on the map there in the lower right corner on the screen, you'll see that it's stamped draft. That's stamped draft for a couple of reasons. One, we're continuing to wait for FEMA to review and approve the final hydraulic model. And then secondly, through the contested case hearing discussions we had with the DNR, there was a little bit of confusion that came up about the required mitigation areas. And so we hope that we're able to resolve those issues, both the Clomer and the mitigation boundaries here in the next month or so, and still be able to proceed with this outreach to the impacted property owners. So that's kind of in a nutshell where we're at with that plan. This 4-page document has been circulated to a few different groups, but if you do have questions or comments on there, we have some time to address those and get it improved. So look forward to hearing from you on that side.
Eric, maybe if I could add just a couple things. You mentioned the map related to the different zones. This was as Eric said, a big topic during the contested case hearing where Minnesota was defending its permit issuance to the project, and we're working with Minnesota DR to define those. But wanted to maybe help. We don't have contested case hearing update on this agenda, and so that might be a good segue to understand what is the timeline we're waiting for on a couple of these things. We have always known that the final permit conditions in Minnesota may alter where we end up having to send letters and what the impact list is. And so while we're fairly comfortable on the North Dakota side, I think the contested case hearing is still expected to take a while to get a ruling. I think estimates from John Shockley were that we're looking sometime in mid-October before we have a definitive ruling from the judge. and then the DNR commissioner makes a decision after that. And so for those in Minnesota on the call here, know that we might not have a, property owner impact list until much later this year. And we may, in the outreach side of things, may be forced into a situation where we have to decide, okay, we have a definitive list on the North Dakota side that we're pretty comfortable with sending out to. On the Minnesota side, the timing may be different. And so we'll need to decide, do we send a more general, broader letter to a larger area, or do we wait on the Minnesota side? And so that, just wanted to preface that, because I think we're gonna have to make a decision here at some point. I don't know, is that fair, Eric?
Yeah, I guess maybe just a few more comments on that. As a result of the discussions during the contested case hearing, the DNR staff have asked us to supply them with the updated model and updated mapping and property owner lists. And the goal is to review all those things, hopefully with the DNR staff over the next month or so. And I guess I'm sort of an optimist here. Maybe we'll be able to resolve our differences, or, I don't know, there's differences, probably resolve our points of confusion with the DNR staff, by the end of July, mid-August timeframe. And we'll have to be fluid, I think, as to whether we're going to be comfortable notifying property owners prior to the final judge's ruling, or if we truly have to sit and wait. And so I think that's something that we'll actively monitor and assess how things are going with our conversations with the DNR staff. If there's other, go ahead.
Yeah, I think in terms of who the letters will go to in Minnesota, I just think we should hold out and even talking about that until at least late July. I know that there's been some discussion about where we are with the contested case, and that record is still going to be open for a little bit. We may be looking at having an executive session by the full board to review some of the things that have gone on in the contested case. So I just think we're premature in talking about sending anything out at this point in Minnesota. So
Sure,
that's my 2 cents.
Sam, I might just move on to another lands topic that I think the outreach committee should be aware of. As the group is hopefully aware, the Cass County Joint Board has the responsibility of doing the land acquisitions for the project on the North Dakota side. And in doing so, they're following all the statutory steps and processes that are quite complex, and many steps in the recipe. We're getting to the point where negotiations with a handful of property owners are not reaching a conclusion, and as we follow down the steps and we forecast out the time of each of those steps, we're at a point where we will be asking the Cass County Joint Board tomorrow morning to approve the first batch of requests to the county commission. And those requests will be to have the county commission invite property owners to a county commission meeting. That meeting will be in early August. And at that early August meeting, we will be asking the county commission for approval to utilize quick take eminent domain. So that's obviously been a lightning rod topic for many legislative sessions, and I think many of you are familiar with that. I guess we're just trying to make sure that as many people are aware that that's the sort of ugly part of the acquisition process. And we've had lots of discussions with different leadership groups, and been encouraged to keep moving forward as to acquire the necessary lands. This is really critical for the process is required to bid the P3 portion of the project, and the core, of course, is moving forward with trying to bid out the Southern Embankment Reach 1 and the I-29 road raise. And so Those quick take actions will be getting more serious here over the coming weeks and months, and that I just want to make sure everybody's aware of those activities. And then related to that, we do of the properties that we're continuing to try to reach a deal on, there are a few of them that are occupied structures, whether it's homes or businesses. And not only do we need to acquire those homes, we need to make sure that the occupants are moved out of the way so that we can continue to bid and construct the project. And so there are 90-day notices that we are required to provide to those property owners. And similarly to the request for Cass County to invite property owners, we will be asking the Cass County Joint Board tomorrow morning to approve sending some 90-day notices to the first batch of these property owners. So things are getting more serious, and that's unfortunate, but I guess that's where we're at in the process, and happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you, Eric, for that update. Any questions for Eric? Any updates on the Clomer update, or did we cover that as well?
We are in the final approval stage with FEMA. We're expecting that really anytime. There's just been some lingering back and forth on some minor issues, and so we expect that here soon.
Okay. All right. Anything else on property owners outreach updates at all? If not, let's move on to the communications plan.
As the committee knows, we've been working on the communications plan for some time now, and we've been able to do a lot of it virtually. I think it's probably fair to say that some of the brainstorming side of this would be helpful to be together, and so we're just starting to get back together now, and so we'll see some good progress over the next couple of weeks. But we do have some stuff to walk through with you, a couple slides to show you some of the information. With the elections that took place in June, we're likely to have two new board members, potentially a new outreach committee member or 2 outreach committee members. And so I do want to propose having a couple more focus groups, or at least one-on-ones with Mayor Dardis, who's on the call today here, and with potentially with Commissioner Arlette Preston and Fargo too, just to kind of get a new and different perspective than we've had before. And so I think some of that will be helpful to this. Talk a little bit more about that as we go through the slides here. But we've also did a survey, and so I wanted to share some of those results with the committee today. So some general demographics, and this is what we really tried to do with this communications plan, is really to have a data-driven plan. I think we get an awful lot of comments about the project and different ideas, and we wanted to have some data that backed up what the analysis was and what the strategies were going to be. And so you can see some of the different demographics of the region that we're trying to reach here. I don't think any of this is terribly surprising, but you can see that millennials are making up the largest share of the target, general public. And as we always thought, millennials were younger folks, but you can see 1981 now, that means millennials are 39 on the upper end, and so they're getting to be the major professional stage of life here. General digital and social media usage. I think some of this is interesting. What stands out, we had a couple main points. I think, everyone has access to the internet and smartphone, and they do listen to the radio. I thought one interesting thing here is the household subscribes to cable TV. You can see that a pretty small share of the public has cable TV. And so I think there's a difference between cable and local news. And as you'll see in the next slides here, that local news is still very much the largest factor where they get their information. But let's talk about the survey results for a little bit. We did have pretty high survey results. I think Fargo residents, we had something like 25% return rate from surveys. And the other areas were all over 10%, which I think originally when this committee asked what I expected, I think I said 10% response. And so we're happy with the survey results. They came in pretty good. You can see the main points here, that they received their information from the newspaper and television and radio, kind of what we expected. one thing we were happy about is across all different subsections that we sent out to, they all said they receive enough information about the project. But I think as we dig into that a little bit more, you find some nuances in there. You can see they indicated they want more information by newspaper and social media. And so I think there are some new social media avenues that are worth exploring that we haven't done in the past. You can see among upstream respondents, there's a heavier desire to receive more information through public meetings. And I think that's been I thought it was an interesting result because I think early on in the project, we probably had a lot of public meetings upstream, and now we've done more targeted public meetings. One thing I think we've learned through this virtual process, we did a meeting for the Drain 27 wetland restoration project, and we were able to do it virtually with a targeted area. And I was thinking maybe things like that could be more useful in the future where, not requiring a lot of traveling, and you can tape them and use them so people can view them anytime. So we're looking at some of those type of strategies. So here's the question: do you get enough information about the project? You can see that everybody said yes as the majority, but there are some differences when you get down to it. Fargo gets a lot of information about the project. You can see the no's are fairly small. I think the fact that we have any no's does show that we need to figure out how to get to them. If you're saying no here, that means you don't get enough information. And so we're trying to figure out, if you say no, where do you get your news and why aren't you getting that information? But I think the concerning thing for me here is the upstream residents. You can see an awful lot of people don't get enough information about the project. And while it's not a majority, it's still a pretty big factor. And so I think we need to figure out how to target those no's better than we're doing now. Another interesting thing as you look at the next slide is how these, do you get enough information, has a pretty heavy correlation with how favorable you feel about the project. It's pretty much an exact correlation when you look at it. And so that's kind of interesting. So this is a lot of bar charts on here. I don't think the bar charts are that different across each of the populations. It shows that newspaper and TV news are still the main source of information for everybody. There's some variability in the other stuff, but I think that's still the main news source around here. If you look at the far right, you'll see a net favorability. This is how favorable compared to the unfavorables. So it takes out the answers that are neutral or no opinion. So it just looks as, favorable versus unfavorable. And you can see that yellow line that goes across is how that feels about that. Fargo had a very high favorability factor. Moorhead had the second highest. West Fargo then was actually a little bit on the negative side, just below negative. So there was actually more unfavorable views in West Fargo. And I think that's one reason why we'd like to sit down with Mayor Dardis and talk to him about what we can do about that. And it's to me, it's been kind of interesting because this is the first time we've done this. It would be nice, to have this every year for the last 8 years and see how things are trending. Because if you're negative in West Fargo, is that, where were we 3 years ago? Was it more negative? It's tough to really tell a correlation or a trend. And so, but I think there's a lot we can do there. Upstream residents, obviously, as expected, probably do not have a great favorability on this. One thing we don't have in here, I don't think, is the no opinions. For instance, in Moorhead, while they had a high favorability index, the no opinions was also fairly high, which kind of leads me to believe that there's more we could do there to reach people that don't have an opinion one way or another. That seems a good target for me. So here's a couple of more sort of our analysis. So of those respondents who view the project neutrally or favorably, they get their information from local paper and news, and that they would like more information that way. But of the respondents who viewed it negatively, they're more often receiving their news about the project on social media or word of mouth. And so I think that can help us define some strategies on how we reach them, which I think we can look at. So the next steps, again, consider a couple additional focus. And then we expect to bring a draft plan to this committee, and hope this committee would recommend approval to the board at their meeting as well. And so this is probably likely August to give us some time to get together in person and hash out the remaining steps here. I don't know if anybody has any questions on the survey or where we're at in the process here.
This is Jake. I noticed that fmdiversion.gov has a pretty low net favorability.
Yeah. You know, if you look at it compared to, you know, you got to figure out what you're comparing it to. So if you compare it to online newspaper, which is probably the form, you can see that it's, you know, I think it's probably a little bit lower than the form, but those are where they're getting their news online. And if you look at it compared to social media, which is the other online, we're actually higher than social media in some areas and lower in others. So if you look at it compared to other internet sources, I think it's somewhat on par. But what I'd like to dig into maybe, Jake, a little bit more is, you know, you really have to be interested in the project to go to fmdiversion.gov. And so I'd be curious to see, do the people that have a favorable view, do they get more information from fmgov than those with no opinion, for instance? They probably don't go to fmdiversion.gov at all. So we probably need to dig into that a little bit more to understand.
Rocky,
Okay, any other questions?
Oh,
go ahead.
Rocky, this is Shelley Carlson. I had put something in the chat about the fact that the Forum newspaper has now been reduced to 2 days, and it's being delivered through the mail. So I'm just wondering, you know, the impact that's going to have on individuals who seek out their information from a paper newspaper, and maybe need to seek out doing articles for some of the more specific city-based newspapers, like the West Fargo Pioneer or the Moorhead Extra, or some of those.
Yeah, that's a good point. We need to probably make sure we address that in the plan on, you know, what's our strategy then if people do get a lot of information from the paper, where are they going to get it now? So yeah. I know one thing, Tammy Jo, she used to work at one of the regional papers, and so she's brought a good sense of making sure we get all our releases to the, you know, smaller publications, and I think we've seen them run some of our stuff, but we could probably do a better job talking with them and pushing more information out to them as well.
All right, any other, go ahead.
Oh, Mr. Chair, this is Joel. So I just wanted to show what I think is interesting on the sources of information. You can see that in the top 4 within each community is word of mouth. And right next to that, in the top 3 is radio. And so when we think about the factual information that gets disseminated about the project, generally that's not coming from word of mouth, or maybe not radio, talk radio maybe in particular. And so as you can see, there's a large amount of respondents that get their information just through word of mouth and radio. And so when we talk about maybe addressing some of the misinformation that's circulating around, you know, I think some of this data could be insightful to kind of maybe strategize, you know, how to address some of those, and maybe how to create content in a different format that could be distributed through those means or what have you. But it was just insight that I saw as I looked at the data. I felt it appropriate to share to the Public Outreach Committee. So.
Joel, that's a good observation. I think, you know, when we've talked about that in the past, you know, I think one thing we did is we targeted what we called community leaders or opinion leaders. And we spent, you know, a lot of time going around to all the different Kiwanis clubs and Rotary clubs, that sort of thing. But I think, you know, try to hit those people that probably talk more about it with their friends or their circles. You know, one thing we haven't done is expand that effort outside Fargo-Moorhead, West Fargo area all that much. And maybe it's worth a trip to some outside areas to their different groups, you know, go to Wahpeton and meet with, you know, the Lions Club type thing and expand some of that just to kind of spread that word of mouth, you know, maybe tougher meetings, but I think they worked in Fargo area and Moorhead area, and we've had to talk about stuff in the past. And so maybe that's an option.
Sure.
Anything else on the survey? And I'm assuming, Rocky, you're going to move into the analytics here next if there's no other questions.
Yeah, I'm going to turn this over to Tammy Jo.
All right.
So you can see all the analytics here on the scene or on the slide. One thing I will note that as we do virtual meetings, those are all live streamed on Twitter, and City of Fargo streams them on Facebook as well. And they actually get quite a few views, which is pretty good. And those are not necessarily captured in this analytics report. Pretty standard month. We've had some good tweets with construction and with some of the construction videos. And we've pulled out some of the numbers from the workforce study that was presented in April and some of the prevent plant information that was presented. So those tweets have done pretty well. That's kind of it for analytics, I think, this month, unless anyone has any questions.
Here's a tweet just to highlight that the Corps has been under a no travel restriction for the last 3 months or so. The colonel in the middle there actually took advantage of an opportunity. They had to get some vehicles from their office in St. Paul down to the construction site, and so he volunteered to be one of the drivers of those vehicles just so he could use the excuse to come down here and see the work underway. So Joel and Jason Benson there in the cool shades met him out at the site and helped show him around and talked about it. And so they tweeted about that today, right before the meeting.
Great.
One thing I will just mention that I forgot to say is that the Diversion does have a LinkedIn page. So if you're on LinkedIn and you'd like to connect with the project, that's another platform that we've recently added to the lineup.
All right. Thanks, Tammy Jo. And it looks like we're going to move into some videos, maybe.
We actually cut the videos out, and I just sent them that link. And so we get kind of mixed reviews on showing videos over the virtual platform, but we did want to provide the link. So this is maybe just to talk about it quick. This is the Diversion Inland Control Structure. You're looking north down County Road 17. You can see that, probably doesn't notice a lot of difference other than it's green, which is good, but there's been a lot of activity underway, and they're starting to pour concrete, I understand, here this month soon. And so I think we'll start to see some real changes in the visuals hopefully soon as well. It's always nice to see green too, I think. That's good. So here's a closer up view of it. You can see a lot of equipment down there. So this one is maybe a little more unfamiliar for everybody. This is the Wild Rice River control structure. This is, you can see the interstate running along the right side of the screen, kind of in the distance. And this is the Wild Rice River. And so you're looking north, trying to see what else they can do to explain the structure runs sort of, you can see where it's the scraping along the dirt there in the middle. That is the future channel that will end up having the structure where the equipment is, and that will go right across the Wild Rice River there. Maybe one thing to point out here, we're working on a billboard of sorts, like we see around town, sort of future home of. We thought with the property next to the interstate, it would be a good opportunity to highlight the project that construction's underway. And we also expect, as we get a lot of traffic along there, people are going to wonder what's going on there. And so if you look at the tree line kind of in the upper right where it gets close to the interstate, that will be the location of a billboard. of sorts. It's large enough so you can see it while you're driving 70 miles per hour. But I think that'll be helpful. Good information. You know, it's a way to reach people as from upstream as well as they drive, you know, to and fro the metro area. We do have a video of the Wild Rice River control structure too that I can send out. It's not quite as interesting because they're still just, you know, basically moving topsoil, but we should start seeing more activity on that site as well.
All right.
Any questions on those?
Next item.
So this is the Drain 27 Wetland Restoration Project. We held a public meeting for this a couple months ago. We had recently talked with the Corps about holding another public meeting. The first one was really to get to the property owners and regional sort of township representatives to get to them early, let them know about the project so they don't hear about it elsewhere. And so it was really the first time anybody had heard about the project is when we had the initial meeting. There were a number of questions that we needed to take back and do some work on. And so this meeting will probably be in mid-July. It helps comply with the environmental work that the Corps has to do, and they have to do some outreach based on it as well. And so it'll be a required meeting. This, again, will be sent out to just the property owners in that area and then the township officials and the water district officials. But if anybody else from the public is interested, they're certainly welcome to attend. It will probably be a virtual meeting, solely a virtual meeting again, because I think the Corps will still have some restrictions in place. But this project is moving forward. The design's moving forward with construction expected to happen in 2021. So it's moving quickly. I wanted to give this committee an update because the meeting may happen before our July committee meeting.
All right. Anything else, Joel or Rocky? We go to the order.
Oh,
I just have one question, and it's the first time I've seen it on my toolbar here. There's a raise your hand icon.
Yeah.
Has anybody used that, and how does it work?
Yeah, so if you click raise your hand,
Yep.
you can see, which I just did, on the participant list. If you have the participant list up, you can see it gets a little hand icon next to your name. It's a polite way to not interrupt somebody.
Yep.
I'm not always good at that. So.
Well, I don't think many of us are used to it. So, somebody mentioned at an earlier meeting, I did not see the hand on my list of icons. So good to know it's there. So maybe try to use it at some future meetings, especially finance perhaps. So anyway, I just had to get tested, see how that works. So thank you.
No, good observation, Rick. That's actually a new feature that Microsoft Teams has rolled out. So
Excellent. All right. Anything else before we adjourn? All right. Our next meeting, July 22nd, 2020, be in person, perhaps. Joel, is that correct?
yep, that's correct, Commissioner Steen. Yes.
All right. With that, we'll adjourn. Thank you, everybody.